Hey, what's going on, everyone? We want to just greet you. Mercy, peace, and love be multiplied to you all. Um, my name is Miguel Holder,
And my name is Anisha Holder.
and this is another segment of Holding On to Faith with the Holders. We're actually coming from Barbados. We're in Barbados, so if you hear any background noise, it's just because we're not in a place that's super quiet. But we're just gonna make do with what we have, so we're gonna move forward. Okay. So today's segment, we're going to be talking about leaving and cleaving. We're going to be talking about leaving and cleaving in marriage. And what is leaving and cleaving? Why is it biblical? How do families approach leaving? How do spouses approach leaving and cleaving? And so forth. Now, the main verse that we are actually going to be using, and that's highlighted for this specific segment, is Genesis chapter 2 and 24. And it says, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. In other translations, it says, man will hold fast, or it will say join together. So a man and a woman, when they're married, are joined together. And we know that happens because the Bible says that it is the foreshadowing of the union of Jesus Christ and the church. Now, the church, which is the bride of Jesus Christ, forsakes the world, right? This is why we see a foreshadowing, and becomes one with Jesus Christ, like a man becomes one with his wife. And I can go into greater details about this whole topic, but I'm just going to leave it right there, as in, leaving and cleaving is a foreshadowing of the church and Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so I think one thing to point out in this discussion that we're going to be talking about is to understand that you don't want to have certain people within your marriage, but you want to be able to hold fast to your spouse, as you're saying, so that the two of you, as you enter into marriage, it is a one union where you both can go forward in the things of God, and also understanding that sometimes you may not be able to keep certain family members involved, which we're going to talk a little bit more in detail.
Great. People that probably having questions like leaving and cleaving, like why should somebody leave? Leave your family, a family that they know for 20, 30, 40 years. Leave them and then get joined together to their spouse, forsake others. Some people ask, why should I even do that? But one thing you have to always understand is that this is biblical. It's a biblical mandate, and it's imperative that we come to a point in our lives that we decide to, beyond a shadow of a doubt, leave our families, leave, our friends, achieve, to our spouse. If you're a mama's boy, or if you're a daddy's girl, or vice versa, you have to come to a point where you do break away. It's like breaking away from the world, right? And you have to break away and connect with your spouse wholeheartedly. Me and Denisha, we had a lot of issues with family, especially our parents, and we had to learn quickly that our marriage could have been jeopardized. Our relationship would have been jeopardized if we didn't create healthy boundaries and have a complete expectation for our families to respect our spouse. So we expected our families to actually have respect for our spouse and respect for our marriage. Now, leaving and cleaving is something that's very biblical, and it shouldn't be ignored. And this is one of the main reasons why a lot of relationships that are in bad shape, and there's a lot of relationships that are in bad shape, and they're in bad shape because they allow their parents and their family members to get mingled into their marriage. Now, watch this. When someone doesn't choose to follow the biblical principle of leaving and cleaving, and they set themselves up for, or they open doors, possibilities of destroying the marriage and even destroying or blocking their destiny. Let me just go into that a little bit. When we look into the story of Laban, we see that when we listen to the story of Jacob and Laban, what we see is a relationship that was intermingled and controlled for a portion of time by Laban. And Laban was literally controlling Jacob, and that was Jacob's father-in-law. And while this was happening, and we know this was happening, is what he was doing is he was not only trying to control him, but he was very unreasonable. So I want those that are getting into marriage or in marriage to be very mindful and discerning and pay attention to your parent, not just the in-law, but your parent, to see if they're the one that's being unreasonable to your spouse. Now, I'll give you an example. Point one is Laban had intentionally deceived Jacob, right? He had intentionally deceived and tricked him for Leah and Rachel. He had wanted Rachel, but he ended up getting Leah, and he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. And then he even ended up working extended after that so that he could have, something to bring for his family, right? So he could have, land and cattle. He ended up dealing with all this type of oppression, all this type of deception, all this type of unreasonable behavior for an extended period of time. But I want spouses, when you're getting these type of situations, to pay attention to your family. Make sure that they're not trying to, trick your spouse or manipulate your spouse, or, using different types of gaslighting tactics on your spouse. My advice is to actually defend your spouse. In many cases, people don't defend their spouse. They see that their family's unfairing them, and they're just like, well, actually, that's just cool. That's fine. And these things are what can lead to a marriage being on the rocks, right? And another thing is that I want to mention is that Laban and Jacob never had a good relationship, period. And Laban didn't have a good relationship with Jacob. You got to be mindful of this, right? Because a lot of times they don't have a good relationship. Parents will not have a good relationship with their spouse. And it's not because that your spouse or husband or your wife did something wrong. It's just they don't like them. It didn't matter what they did, right? They wouldn't have liked them anyways. They might not like them because they're not tall enough, right? They're not good looking enough. If they're not, rich enough, or the most educated person, right? For those reasons, we're not talking about reasons that, the person is not God. He's not certain. That we're talking about very trivial reasons as to why they don't like the person. And there's people that actually are like that. And that's how Laban was, right? In treating Jacob. And Jacob was a man of God. We know that he was serving God. He had the promise of God in his life, but Laban didn't like him. And I want to say something quickly for everyone. And that's, even when you marry your spouse, you're not marrying the family. Like, you're not marrying the family. You are marrying your spouse, right? You're not marrying their family. Like, when the two become one, you become the family. You two become the family, and your children, if you have any, become that family. And then everybody else is your extended family. Right? So everybody else is your extended family. Your parents become your extended family as of that day. They're no longer the main family. Their main family is the family that you have, right? And because they're the main family, you have to be very mindful if people that are from your extended family now are trying to ruin your destiny or destroy your destiny. I want to give you an example of where Laban was trying to control and manipulate it. I just want to say this show you really quickly. This is in Genesis chapter 31, and it goes, and he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and that which was our father's hath begotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and beheld it was not toward him as before. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Now, further down in chapter 25, we see that it goes, and then Laban overtook Jacob. Then Laban overtook Jacob. So he actually, when Jacob ran away, he met up with Jacob. Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount Eliah. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with sword? So it's ludicrous. He's saying that he's taking away his daughters like captives away from the sword. What are we talking about? It's Jacob's family now. why are you trying to say that he's robbing something from his family now? Right? Now watch, let me continue. Wherefore dost thou flee away secretly and steal away from me? Didst not tell me that I might have thee away with mirth and with song, with tabret and with harp. So he's saying they're like, well, if I knew you were leaving, was going to do all this special celebrations and special stuff for you. That's a lie. He wasn't planning to do any of that because he already didn't like Jacob already. Now watch this in 28 now. It goes, and hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolish in doing so. So what he's saying is he's doing foolish when God already gave him a promise. Specifically, it's time for you to leave, and saying, well, you shouldn't be leaving. And, well, if you're going to leave, I was going to do all this stuff for you. And I want to make, I wanted to do all this great stuff for you. But if Jacob didn't leave at the time that he left, said, you know what, I'm not waiting here. I'm getting out of here and I'm leaving right now, his destiny would have been blocked. And this is something that I want to tell all those that are listening, that you can't allow people to block your destiny. You can't allow people, your spouses, your family, to block your destiny. If you're with your spouse, you have a destiny and you have to accomplish it. And this really goes for ministers as well. I want ministers to really take heed to what I'm saying. Those that are called to ministry, you have to understand that your destiny is tied to you and your wife, right? You gotta really understand that it's you and your wife or your husband. That's where your destiny lies in, right? You don't want to forget that or let people sidetrack you and get you on the wrong road. And one last thing I would like to say before I pass it over. A lot of times we don't actually approach getting away from our family or moving away from our family or, really cleaving, to our new family because we feel as if it's going to dishonor our family. But I just want to be here to tell you that when you leave and cleave to your spouse and to your family, you're actually not dishonoring your family. If they're trying to control you and make it seem as if you're dishonoring them, you're not doing that because you're actually doing what God has told you to do. The Bible says, I would rather be pleaser of God than pleaser of man. I would rather follow God than please man. I would rather do what God has told me to do and the principles that God has set forth for me, especially for my family, than to try to please people or try to please my mom or try to please my dad, try to please my brothers and sisters. I'm not going to do that. And you're not dishonoring any of them. You're not dishonoring your mother. You're not dishonoring your father. It's time for you to move on and go into your future and into your destiny.
Amen. So for those of you that are watching, I'm going to be touching base on Saul's relationship with David. And so for most of you that know this story, the children of Israel from the beginning wanted a king. And so God did not want them to have a king. For most of you that know the story with that. However, Saul was appointed king of Israel and was rejected by the Lord. And so the beginning of Saul and David's relationship comes from the dynamics of what had happened to Saul. And so the Lord speaks to Samuel that he has chosen a king after his own heart, which was David. And you can find that as well in 1 Samuel chapter 16. It talks about how the spirit of the Lord departed from Saul and a harmful spirit from the Lord tormented him. And so David found favor in the sight of Saul because when David was playing the harp, Saul was refreshed and well, and the harmful spirit departed from him. But in 1 Samuel chapter 17, it talks about how King Saul said, whoever defies the Philistines will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. So Saul knew, first of all, that the Spirit of the Lord had left him. And he also knew that David would become the next king because he saw the favor of the Lord on David's life. And so Saul tried multiple times to bring division in David's life. And we'll talk a little bit about that between him. Because Saul had an evil spirit on him and a spirit that was tormenting, he was always trying to go after David. And we're going to look at the dynamics of both of their relationship. So David is anointed to be king in 1 Samuel chapter 16, and Saul is rejected by the Lord. And so when the Lord speaks to Samuel and David does become king, this creates a lot of issues as well for Saul because he realizes that things were happening. He's realizing that there was a difference in how he was functioning. He realizes that David had favor. And so going further down in the story, we know that David goes to defy the Philistines. Okay, but the promise that was given to David originally was that he would receive Saul's daughter Merab. Okay, and so after David had killed Goliath, it says that Saul never let David leave to go back to his father's house. So Saul, first of all, was also trying to keep an eye on David because he was trying to also control him, keeping his eye close to David because he was also jealous of David. Okay? And so you see this later on that when Saul tries to keep him in his proximity so that he can later on try to destroy him. So it was never because Saul liked David, even though David was playing the harp and it allowed the spirits to leave Saul. Saul didn't have a true, genuine love for David, even though he told him, hey, I'm going to promise you my daughter Merab if you go and defy the Philistines. And we're going to see later on how this plays out. But Saul starts to eye David from that day forward. And Saul became afraid of David because he knew that God was with David. Okay. But what ends up happening here as well is that when David does fight the Philistines, and that ended up happening, he didn't actually receive Merab as his wife. So again, you see that Saul actually did not keep his promise. Saul's jealousy of David played a huge role in David's reactions, and played a huge role in Saul's reactions to David and the way that he treated him and the way that he tried to control him. And later also tries to manipulate David's relationship with his other daughter. So what ends up happening? He doesn't give David Merab. He ends up saying, well, now you can go and do more to receive Michal to be David's wife. And so here now David had to go and defeat more Philistine to be able now and to cut off the foreskins, 100 foreskins, to be able now to get Michal as his wife, which didn't make sense because he already had killed the Philistines previously, didn't receive Merab, which was the first daughter, and then had to go and kill more Philistines, 100 foreskins now, to be able to get Michal as his wife. So you can already see the manipulation. You could already see the deceit. You can already see that he was not honest and he had no pure intentions from the beginning. And of course, for those of you that know the story, Saul is David's father-in-law, or becomes David's father-in-law when he's married to Michal. So this is interesting because according to what you were talking about, this is the same thing that happened with Laban, right? Laban, does the same thing with Jacob, right? He, instead of giving Jacob Rachel, he gives him Leah instead. So there is deceit again. There was all this hiding beneath, trying to trick Jacob, right? Making him work more for something that he was supposed to originally get. Okay. And so we see that same correlation. Saul tells David that he's going to get Merab when he defeats the Philistines, but again, he does not get Merab. And then Saul tries to give David Michal after. So same correlation. Now, what's interesting with this story is, remember that Michal loves David. The scripture says that Michal loves David. And so Saul tells David that he will give him Michal to be a snare unto him. So Michal loved David so much, but Saul's intention was, I'm going to give him Michal to be a snare unto him. So it wasn't because he was trying to bring a union for David because he loved David, but he wanted Michal to be a snare unto David, to be able to antagonize him and torment him in some kind of way. And so David, when he receives Michal, it says that, Saul obviously didn't have good intentions and didn't want him to be successful. Saul lies to David and tells his servants to tell David that he has delight in his servant, that he loves David. However, it was not real love because Saul wanted to cause problems in David's life and in his marriage with Michal. And most of you that know the story, you know that it was an ongoing process. And even so that David had to run away from Saul for many years. So Saul was David's enemy continually. And so what Saul thought was that because Michal loved David, that she would turn against him and be with her father. But what ended up happening it turned around for David's good, because later in scripture, when Saul tried to kill David, Michal saved David's life and protected him. Saul had an evil spirit, and thus he would have not even realized that Michal would have protected David, and his plan would have never worked. And in 1 Samuel chapter 19, you can also go through it where it says that Michal makes David escape, through a window. So for most of you that know that story, remember Saul was trying to kill David, and Michal ended up putting something in the bed, covered it up so that it looked like David, and David was able to flee through the window and be able to escape. So she was protecting him. And so Saul, when he finds out, he tells Michelle, why did you deceive me? And why did you let my enemy go? Meanwhile, David was never an enemy of Saul. But Saul, in and of himself, because he did not like David, said that David was an enemy of him, even though David never had a problem with Saul. And so this began a whirlwind with David running from Saul for many years and Saul trying to kill David. And David ends up running for his life and loses his wife, Michelle, along the way. For most of you that know the story, Michelle ends up marrying someone else and David ends up running away and basically everything ends there. But it's not until Saul dies that David has to go back for his wife, Michelle. And so we can see that Saul caused so many issues for David that David and Michelle did not even stay together.
Exactly. Clearly, we can really see right there that, they, because of an in-law that's gone outlaw, an outlaw in-law, really caused the dysfunction within, David and Michelle's lineage. And this happens a lot nowadays for a lot of people that have marriages, are in marriages today. But I want to talk to the people right now that are, that are involved in relationships, about to be involved in a marriage, or they're in their marriage or about to be in a marriage, and they've already had their family get all intertwined into, a biblical God-given, relationship, right? This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about, you're in a relationship with somebody that's, doing drugs or something. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual godly people that are getting into godly marriages where their parents are trying to hinder them. Those people, we want to give some tips. We want to give 5 key points to those people, right? So that they can strengthen their marriage and protect that marriage that they already have, right? Or change around what's been happening already in their marriage and protect it from those exterior influences. So the first one I want to say is set boundaries with family and friends. We've already read it for you in Genesis 20, chapter 2 and 24. It's already said for us to leave and cleave. So that alone already tells us that there is a level and set boundary with our family. So be sure to set healthy boundaries so that you and your spouse can actually be a family together, and accomplish what God has for you, for your unity, because the two become one flesh. You're one. You're not one with your mom. You're not one with your dad. The Bible doesn't say that. It says you're one with your spouse, right? And number 2 is resolve conflicts privately. When disagreements arise, we believe that, you need to resolve those between one another, right? Proverbs chapter 25 and 9 encourages us to handle our disputes personally, and protecting your marriage from outside judgment. So you don't want people to be in your marriage, because you can forgive your spouse for something they did, and then what ends up happening is that the people that heard about what your spouse did are arguing you about and haven't forgiven their spouse. Number 3 is prioritize each other's opinions over others. So you have to make it a habit to prioritize each other's opinions over other people, right? Like you have to take into consideration how your spouse feels, how your significant other feels, rather than other people. Could be friends, could be family. And number 4 is honor and respect each other's families, but stay united. So that speaks for itself. Honor each other's families, respect them, love them. If you have to keep distance from them, that's fine, but just still honor and respect them, but stay united with your spouse. That means at the end of the day, everybody goes home, but it's you and your spouse that go home together. And you got to always remember that, because everybody's going to go here, they're going to go there, but it's going to be you and your spouse together, especially if you're doing it God's way. And number 5 is seek wise faith-based counsel only. I can't stress enough why it's important for you to seek faith-based counseling. You need to seek faith-based counseling for any marriage issues. I know sometimes people want to take counsel from people that are not wise. They don't have the wisdom to instill with you, the godly wisdom to give to you for your marriage. They're going to tell you things that are carnal, that are of this world. In terms of resolution, they might tell you, well, if your husband does this, spit in his coffee. That's not the way to solve it, right? this person does this, do this back for spite. That's not the way to solve it, right? So you want to have godly, faith-based counseling only, because, if you're getting counsel, like, for example, like Michelle, if Michelle was taking Saul's advice and took counsel from an ungodly person like Saul, she would have killed her husband, and she would have been convinced that killing David would have been the right thing to do, because he was ordained to be king and Saul was king at that time. And if he had convinced her, she would have followed through. It's something that was not called for God to do. So this is why you have to seek godly counsel, right? Could be your pastor, could be maybe a Bible study leader, or one of the church counselors, could be any of those people. Seek after godly counsel when you're having marital issue, right? You have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered everything. It's pretty good.
All right, amazing. Once again, I just want to say this is Miguel Holder.
And this is Denisha Holder.
And this is Hold On to Faith with the Holders. And may mercy, peace, and love be multiplied to you all. And, comment, like, share. We'd love to hear your comments and your opinion about what you've gone through in your marriage. If you've gone through something and you want a prayer, or you want us to, help you through something that you're going through, or need more advice, we would love to, share our advice, even on a personal level. And you can always shout us out, and then we can always send you some information where we can personally talk to us. All right?
Bye, everyone.
God bless you all.